And you can also see the video of the Ask Me Anything event that was done. So that is post number 1. Post number 2 that I wanted to share with you is R80 training videos, free of charge videos that allow you to get acquainted with the new R80 if you plan to migrate, give you best practices on how to operate. You just click on the specific subject and you get like a video-based training by an individual from Europe. Let's see if you can see his picture. Yeah, Jim Ockwist. Here he looks a little bit like a zombie from Lord of the Rings. But very good training. I wonder what car is this one. And the third one, which is basically what inspired the next session, is called My Top 3 Check Point CLI Commands. This is a post that I had the privilege to start to write on July 19, 2017. I just shared my top 3 CLI. I have like around 20 years of experience with Checkpoint. I've installed like more than 2,000 firewalls throughout my career, CCMA, CCSI, all the correct buzzwords. And I just shared my top 3 CLI commands that saved me a lot of sleepless nights. It was FWCTL Zed Debug drop, cpstat FW, and FW tab -S-T connections. And then in the end, I just wrote, please add yours in the comments. And then everything exploded. A plethora of people shared their commands, amazing commands, some of them undocumented. There was one guy called Danny Jank that even took the commands, wrote a Python script into an interactive menu that had all the commands running for you. So like this thing like exploded, and exploded so successfully that we decided to have the first session given by a legend. The legend is called Phone Boy. The legend lives. When I was installing firewalls like 19 years ago, when I had a problem, there was no secure knowledge, at least not to my recollection. There wasn't. There was tilde Joe something around tilde Joe. And then there was Phone Boy, phoneboy.com. Every problem that I had with VPN, FWZ, DES, triple DES, all the VPN strong, all that stuff, he had an answer there. It was like, I would say, the first Checkpoint user community ever, and I'm privileged and honored to work with this guy. So without further ado, let me join and welcome Mr. Phone Boy.
So is my mic on? Oh, there we go. Magic, the magic of the microphone. All right, so as Moti said, well, this is a presentation that was put together. This was a presentation that came out of a thread on CheckMates. I am going to mention something else here about CheckMates, but I want to show off the book here. I've got so this is Tim Hall's book, and it's actually got a lot of stuff in here about performance optimization. He's very active on CheckMates. If you saw on the screen before, it was number 3. What do you?
No, it had like to do gather windows.
Oh, okay. All right. So, okay. So, anyway, so it's a great book. It's worth getting if you have to troubleshoot performance and stuff. There's a lot of documentation in this book it does duplicate some stuff in the secure knowledge, but it explains it differently. It does a much better job. It also talks about the nerd knobs, about how these different things work. You know, how packets go through the checkpoint gateway and how to troubleshoot when things go wrong. And actually some of that stuff will be covered in this presentation that we've now got about 25 minutes for. There's one thing I want to highlight in the community before I get started with the presentation. It's a new program called CheckMates Pro. If you're active in the community, and by active we mean at least 250 points in the last year, you can apply to get a 1-year evaluation license to play with the power of infinity in your lab and experiment and learn the product and get better with it and maybe deploy it in production at some point. and also give you an opportunity to ask R&D stuff. You'll be able to schedule a meeting with R&D on a topic of your choosing. You need to get on this fairly quickly. I think we're gonna put an end to allowing people into this program. I think at the beginning of April. So you should get on the community and get on there. And we've got people from all over the world using Nitwits. There are a lot of people from the United States, but as you can see in the analytics, India's number 2. Then there's people all over the place using it, and that's the whole point, right? We want everybody to get together as a virtual community and also do real communities as well. And all the traveling that I'm doing these days is all about going and meeting, doing individual user groups and stuff. So that's also part of this as well. So anyway, but I just wanted to highlight this new program that we have for active members of the community. You can get more information about it on the website. Now, one of the things that came up in this thread about top 3 CLI commands is, we got trouble. Usually, the reason why we're resorting to the CLI is because something went wrong, right? I mean, that's you don't really want to type CLI commands all day. That's not fun. And one of the things that comes up is we call it the Roach Motel effect, right? Packets come in, but they don't come out. And there's nothing obvious to say what actually happens. So, when I was a support engineer, right, you had to follow the bouncing packet, right? It's like, okay, the first thing I always hear is it's the firewall's fault. Well, sometimes it's not the firewall's fault, but you have to troubleshoot and figure out, is the packet getting from point A to point B? Well, you obviously at this point the packet has gotten through the firewall, but it didn't leave. So okay, that means there's something in the firewall. So let's take a look at what happened, right? So did the packet actually get to the firewall? Well, we don't really know unless we actually look for packets that come with the correct MAC address. And so you can look for specific, when you're doing a TCP dump, you can look for a specific MAC address when you're filtering, and you can also look for specific packets like ICMP. But you can verify that packets are coming in with the correct MAC address right here, right? And then you verify that it matches with ifconfig, right? So you can see packets coming in. If the packets, by the way, the packets don't match the MAC address of that interface, they're going to be dropped. That's what's supposed to happen, right? Normally, switching should take care of that. But if you're doing a firewall replacement, this is something you got to worry about, right? So, for example, because when you take out a piece of hardware and you want to swap another one out, the MAC addresses are going to change, right? So this is something you got to watch out for. Now, for those who are taking pictures of the slides, we're going to post the slides on CheckMates after Bangkok. We'll have after this event is over, we'll have all of these slides. You are, of course, welcome to take pictures of me and post on social media. That I have no issue with that. But if you want the slides, they will be available after the event's over. So when that's happening, right? So when the MAC address has changed, sometimes you might need to communicate to the upstream switches and stuff that the MAC address has changed, right? So, because there's this, and I remember when I used to teach address translation back in the day, right? It's like, well, how does address translation work? Well, in order for it to figure out which host to send it to, it has to do an ARP. Who has this address? Tell me, right? And then something responds and says, I have that IP address. Here's my MAC address, right? Well, sometimes that's not happening because the switch thinks, oh, I've got that MAC address, I don't need to ARP for it. Well, sometimes you need to tell the upstream switch, hey, look, the MAC address has changed. And so that's what this ARP ping command is for, right? It's to let other things in the environment know that the IP address, or the MAC address associated with an IP address has changed. Here's an example with it. So you have to specify what interface, how many messages to send out, and so on. And that can help adjust the layer 3, the layer 2, layer 3 MAC caches of the devices in the environment when you're replacing equipment or doing weird things with address translation or what else. Now, we verified, let's say we verified that the packet has actually come in, that the MAC address is all matched, and we've cleared the ARP caches, but now something is eating it. So there's a couple things you got to worry about, right? So it could be that SecureXL ate it for some reason. And so you can validate that with our favorite command, FWCTL Zed Debug. Anybody know what the Zed stands for in this case? A little piece of trivia history. It's a gentleman by the name of Tamir Zegman, who's been a long time Check Point R&D guys. And the reason he did it is because the FWCTL debug command didn't have the options he wanted, so he created it. He basically just added it, and it's one of those things that's lived on for forever and ever and ever. So we're looking for packets that are in this case, we're looking for drops against a certain IP address, and we see, okay, we're seeing some stuff, right, that things got eaten, and then now we can see why. We can see in FW Monitor, of course, that, so it looks like it got accepted, but it got eaten, right? So what ate it? That's something that'll help you. And I didn't know about this one, too. So because my experience with Check Point, I mean, I go back to version 2. This was before Cluster XL and everything, and by the time we got into clustering, I was a Nokia guy. And so we did, so some of the troubleshooting in like Cluster XL is a little bit foreign to me myself, but this is a command that even in the pantheon of our documentation, I wouldn't have known about because it's not documented, right? But you can get a sense for when things failed over and why, right? Because sometimes what will happen with gateways is that our cluster will fail. You'll fail over from node A to node B, and then back to node A, and then back to B, and so on, right? And so you're trying to figure out what happened, because every time there's a failover, now for the most part, you shouldn't have any issues, but sometimes things do happen, and you've got to, you want to find out if there's been some flapping. Well, this will tell you how it's flapping and when. Let me see where I'm at in the presentation. So there can also be administrative failovers. That's something you can do in Cluster XL. You can say, I don't want this guy to be active, right? It's sometimes if you want to move things to another system for one reason or another, there's a way to fake a failover, and that's what this this Cluster XL admin down command is. You can also make it available across reboots, right? So if you reboot a cluster member, you can say don't be the active member, right? Now in VERP we would do this by changing the priority of a given node, and then it would fail over. This is a way to do that just in Cluster XL without using VERP. So this is one of those useful commands that when you're wanting to have a certain node be primary in your cluster, this is how you do it, it's a useful thing. Now something else that's also useful that I think that you need to be able to do sometimes is I've got this security policy I've created, right? And it's like I want to know if I see a packet, what's going to happen to it. Now there's some things you can do in Smart Console to search, right? That's one thing. But to see what actually happens, you need to actually, it would be better if you could just craft some traffic, right? And so that's what this ToolPins is for, right? It allows you to craft a packet in such a way that, it can be sent in a way that it forces the firewall to inspect it and actually say, here's what happens, right? So it's not real traffic, but it's real. It's not real traffic, but it's real traffic, and that forces it to go through, and you can see what happens in a troubleshooting way. And so that's what it's a great tool for that purpose. Unfortunately, this particular tool does not run in R80.10. We need to fix that, and that's a whole different discussion. But another tool that gives you a good idea of how a firewall will operate is TCPTraceHard. I didn't even realize this was in Gaia. So, but I've used it. It's better than a TCP dump to determine what is. Or it's better than like a trace route, because it actually will craft it. Because TCP traceroute uses UDP packets on some random port, and it's meant to tell you hop by hop what is actually going, or what kind of latency you're getting. What TCPTraceArt does is it does it with TCP packets, and so you can actually test the firewall policy to see, am I allowing port 80, and where is port 80 being blocked in the in the chain, right? And you can still get the latency too, right? And it's most likely not going to be filtered by a policy that's also going to give you that's going to also tell you that it's going to block ICMP, right? Because it's actually a good idea to block ICMP, because now there's another thread on CheckMates that actually talks about using ICMP as a way to exfiltrate data out of environments, which is, you can do that with DNS and a lot of other things as well. So because of that, there's a lot of places that have blocked ICMP. This gives you a way to test the connectivity through the firewall, and also gives you an idea of like, what's the latency like. Sorry, all this talking. I gotta stay hydrated. So, now I remember back in the day, the FWTab -t connections -u command, which is a good way to dump the entire connection table. Now, when you dump the connection table, what does it look like? Looks like a bunch of hex numbers, right? Can you translate hex numbers in your head to IP addresses? Probably not. However, there is a way to dump the connection table in a format that's readable. And that's what the FWCTL common tab is. So in here you can see all of the, you can see the IP address, the source destination service, and what the timeouts are and all that stuff. It's the same information that's in the connections table, by the way, without actually having to like decode the connection table. This would have saved me a lot of time back in the day. And I remember that there was some stuff on phoneboy.com that took the connections table and translated it. It's built into the product now. Okay, so I've only got a few more slides, and I've got like 10 more minutes. So anti-spoofing is when I've talked with customers in the past about enabling anti-spoofing, so it's one of those like basic checks that you have to do with it's like, it basically just says, these are the networks I expect to see on these interfaces, right? And if I see an IP address on a different interface, then that's bad, right? And so you want to, if you know your network very well and it's fairly deterministic and things aren't, there's not dynamic routing and such, it's pretty easy to set up, but in complex environments it's not. It's like a very, very beginning check, right? Things will drop with anti-spoofing without actually, things will drop because of anti-spoofing without actually you realizing it, because all of a sudden now this IP address is somewhere else on a different interface because of a routing change, and that causes some issues, and it can be problematic. But sometimes you just want to turn it off, right? Because you're trying to troubleshoot, and normally that takes a policy push, right? And sometimes that's disruptive, and so because you can go in to the GUI and change the anti-spoofing config on an interface, but if you want to turn it off without having to do a policy push, this is one of those on-the-fly commands that's undocumented. So you have a way to turn off anti-spoofing without actually going into the policy and turning it off. This is a temporary fix, obviously, and so there's two commands, and most likely you're running SecureXL, so you're going to need to do both of these, right? So you can turn off anti-spoofing at the forward to firewall level, and you can also turn it off at the SecureXL level, and you need to do both if you're in, in most cases you are running both. Hopefully nobody's running with the SecureXL disabled at this point. If you are, that's a problem when we need to get to the bottom of it. Now this is one I've actually used fairly recently. Resetting SIC without a firewall outage. When you reset, so when I want to reassociate my gateway with a different management station because I've reset SIC I've got a new management station or whatever, what that generally means in the past, right? If you follow CP config and everything, is you got to do a CP stop. It's got to then you can reset the SIC and turn it back on, right? So that requires an outage. And who wants to take an outage? Nobody really wants to take an outage. So without causing an outage, it's possible to reset the SIC activation key. And what this will do also is it will leave the existing policy in place, right? So I can reset the SIC key without actually affecting the policy that's currently loaded on the gateway. Because by the way, that's something else that happens when you reset SIC, is it clears the last installed policy. So unless you've installed policy from the new management, then you're out. So here's a way to do it. This is I think there's like an expert SK on it or something, but it's been posted to CheckMates, and honestly, I've used this many times, and it works fairly well. It's just one of those things that it's one of those things that you don't know about, and and there may be other reasons where you'd want to actually do it the official way, but this is the unofficial way, and the experience with it in general has been pretty good. Likewise, sometimes a new signature in threat prevention or IPS could potentially cause traffic to be dropped for one reason or another as well, right? I mean, we always tell you as Check Point, we definitely take a prevent first mindset. And we want to make sure that you're preventing stuff, But the only way to do that is to try and automate, and deployment of the new signatures and stuff. But let's face it, sometimes there's a false positive or something that happens, and there you go. You got to turn it off without doing a policy push or whatever. And so there's ways to turn, there's ways of turning it off temporarily and making sure it's not the threat prevention. And so that you can turn you can turn the features off temporarily. You can do your test traffic. Let's make sure that those features aren't enabled, and then you can turn the stuff back on. And if it turns out to be a signature, then obviously you got to work with the TAC to figure out which signature it is, and then we work with, and then we get the threat prevention team involved, and they fix the signature so there's not an issue. So, but you do have a way to temporarily turn off threat prevention when things are perhaps not working quite as well. So. There's also a health check script that actually takes a lot of information from a gateway, and you should definitely run this. There's an SK here, and it prints out information about the gateway. And again, it's querying different things in the system, and you can see from the scripts here that it's actually like it's looking at specific things and looking their core files and that kind of thing, and it just prints it out in a nice, easy way. It's a little bit different than CPView, which is also a nice command, but this is something to look at here. And I think I've got one more slide, or I've got a couple more slides. We talk about CPView, right? Interesting trivia about the command CPView. Anybody remember what we called it before CPView? The correct answer is CPTop. Now, can somebody tell me why CPTop might be a bad command to run? Because guess what people did when they typed CPTop sometimes? They occasionally typed CPStop. What happens when you type CPStop? Bad things. An unexpected outage is what happens. So, CPView is a tool that was created around R77. I remember talking with R&D around that time to make sure that it was presenting the right information. So it's pulling out different stats and showing it to you. But you have to go through and check individually, right? The different things that are going on with it. You have to go page through the different screens. What if I want to just dump everything, right? If I'm trying to catch something like that's just happening like in a brief period of time, you need to just basically dump everything all at once and not try and page through the screens. And so you can use CPView -P to dump everything from CPView into one long file, and you can output it to a text file. Just make sure that CPView history is actually being recorded, because if it's not, then CPView is not going to not going to give you much information, because that's something. So CPView is querying some analytics that the system's storing about itself, right? You can adjust how much data it's actually keeping in that situation, but make sure it's turned on and recording data so that it returns something useful for you. Okay, another command you can use with CPView, and this will be the last slide. So you can actually go through and use the Wayback Machine option here. This is a little known option, -T, and you can go through your historical stats over the 30 days using the standard CPView interface. And so you can see, okay, how was my gateway doing 25 days ago? And so you can page through all of the things, and it will show you the dates, and you can actually, there's a way to page through and say, pick a date, show me what's going on, and or what was going on, and then because people were saying, oh, the firewall was having an issue, remember having an outage a few days ago. You can kind of show that the firewall was fine, right? Or you get a sense for where you're at with all of this. So. So I've got a couple minutes here before it's. Is there so anybody got a command that they use that we didn't talk about up here that you think might be useful for everybody else to hear about? Anyone? Yeah. Go ahead. Yep. Yes, that's actually a good one as well, right? And so. There are things like that actually in Tim Hall's book. He actually has a whole section in there that talks about it's basically like making sure that the networking is working before you blame the firewall, right? And there are things like that where packets can be dropped at an interface level. And so that's what's something that and that's actually a good command, right? If you're talking about if something not making it to the firewall, that's one of the first things I check, right? Is what does netstat say? Is the packets being dropped at the, at the layer 2 level before they even get to the security gateway? So, so that's a good one. So anybody else got one? Anyone? Okay, well, I think we'll give Aaron a chance to come up here and speak next. So thank you very much, guys. I'm glad I got to come up and present with you guys, and we'll have the slides for this session and all the other sessions up on CheckMates shortly. Aaron, you want to go back and get wired up? Okay. And meanwhile, I will get the slides pointed up for the next. For Aaron, because he's using my laptop to do this. So just a second. So while he gets wired up, I'm going to, and I'll just put this here for him. So one of the things I get to do as part of as the public face of CheckMates. I joke that I am I'm the entertainment, right? When you're going to the CheckMates site, because when we started doing it about 9 months ago, the only person that was answering questions was me, right, for the most part. Now, since then, there's a lot more people. We've got other partners and other customers answering questions. We've got R&D more involved. It's actually really hard when I'm doing events like CPXs, because I've done all 3 CPXs. This is the first time I've presented at a CPX in the 9 years I've been at Check Point. In that time, there's been in that time, it's. I lost my train of thought. It happens. Oh, so it's only one mic. Okay. So why don't you give me that, and why don't you give me give me that so I can talk, and then you get him wired up.
There we go. Hello. But in any case, I get to talk with so many more customers now, and I know over the years I've helped a lot of customers through phoneboy.com, and it's kind of ironic that it took Check Point 18 years to start paying me to do what I was doing for free back in the early days. So, but I get to talk with a lot of customers now, and so I get to find out both the good and the bad about what our customers are doing. Certainly, I also get involved in a little bit of some of like the customer success stories and so on. But part of what I get to do and what I got to do for these events is review slides and talk with real customers about how they're using our products and how they're being successful at it. So our first speaker is somebody that's actually leveraging CloudGuard. We called it VSEC before, and actually making use of our technologies. This is real stuff here, right? This is not just it's one thing to hear us as Check Point saying here's how it all works, right? And this is how great it can be, and you hear about architecture and all that stuff, and I get it, right? But at the same time, I think that the other you want to hear how it really works and how customers are really using it, and knowing that okay, I can be successful at this because somebody else has been successful at it. And I can tell you that cloud is a really important thing, right? And it's not just because it's hosted on somebody else's infrastructure, but because it enables a certain level of flexibility that you just don't have, you haven't had. So I think this will be a great talk just in terms of like the challenges that they have as an Zero has as an organization, how Check Point helped them solve it, and how we work together to make it all happen. So without further ado, I will present Aaron McCone.
Oh, where's the